Welcome to this edition of Journals of Spiritual Discovery, brought to you by spiritualteachers.org. I'm your host, Sean Nevins.
My guest this episode is Federico Faggin, and just a little bit of background. Dr. Faggin in 1968 moved to Palo Alto, California to work at Fairchild Semiconductor, where he created the metal oxide semiconductor silicon gate technology, which is a core technology used in fabrication of most microchips today. In 1970, he joined Intel, where he led implementation of a new method for random logic chip design using silicon gate technology. He was the lead for the design and development of all four integrated circuits in Intel's groundbreaking MCS microprocessor family, the world's first commercial microprocessor. Dr. Faggin left Intel at the end of 1974 to co-found Zilog. At Zilog, he conceived and architected the Z80 microprocessor and directed its development. He was Zilog's president and CEO until 1980. In 1986, he co-founded and was CEO of Synaptics, a company pioneering in touchpads and touchscreens. He later became president and CEO of Foveon Inc., the company making image sensors, from 2003 until the company was acquired in 2008. And most recently, Dr. Faggin founded the Federico and Elvia Faggin Foundation to support the scientific study of consciousness. So I just want to thank you, Federico, for agreeing to this interview. If I've made any, if I've left out any of your accomplishments in that brief, very brief bio, please feel free to fill those in.
It's a pleasure to be here, and you left out anything.
Great. I will be the first to admit that many of your accomplishments are outside the realm, far outside the realm of my expertise. But your interest in consciousness is what brought about this interview. And I was really curious if we could start with Synaptics. And in 1986, that company was actually founded for creating neural networks. And there's a particular quote that I found by you that I thought might kick off our interview. And you said, I started asking myself, could I make a conscious computer? It began to seem like an impossible task for consciousness to emerge from electrical signals. In this intensity of trying to understand this, an experience occurred. So could we start with that and tell us, what was this experience?
Yes, just to get a little better background of what happened in the 87, 88 period. I was studying neuroscience and biology, and I had correctly understood that neural networks were the way of the future to actually solve the innumerable problems that artificial intelligence at that time could not even come close to solving. It took a little longer. It took another 20 years before those problems started to be solved, but the solution came exactly from neural networks, which at that time they were looked down by the experts in AI. But studying neuroscience, I was asking myself, wait a second, I mean, these books describe, for example, the taste of chocolate as if the taste of chocolate was the same thing as the electrical signal in the brain that allow us to recognize chocolate. How can that be the same? I asked myself. This is, the electrical signals, how can they possibly produce sensations and feelings, which is how I know. I know through sensations and feelings, not because I see electrical signals, but if I perceive sensations and feelings, where are those coming from? They cannot come from the electrical signals. Where is in physics something that can tell me how electrical signals can be converted into sensations and feelings? And besides, sensations and feelings are kind of strange if you think about it, because they're not numbers. Physics and science and computers are about numbers, numbers in binary or numbers in decimal or whatever but still numbers. But what I feel, the love that I feel, has a depth, as dimensions that I cannot even define, but I have a sense of them within myself. Where is all this stuff coming from? And so I could not in those days say, in this articulate way what consciousness and feelings and sensations were, but what was considered came out 8 years later by a philosopher called David Chalmers. He called this problem the hard problem of consciousness. In other words, how can exactly the way I saw it in those days, how can you transform electrical signals or signals in the classical world, in the physical world, into sensations and feelings? And he called sensations and feelings qualia. And so qualia is the name for something that we don't know where it comes from. At that time, I was also not very happy with my life, despite having achieved everything that any reasonable person would say I should be very happy. I had a beautiful family. Everybody was happy, was healthy. I had more money than I needed to live the rest of my life without working. I was famous. So what could one want more than that? And I was unhappy. And so what's wrong with this picture? Clearly, that was also a problem of consciousness. And I wanted to, as a physicist, I was materialist, I was a physicalist, in the sense that I thought that everything can be explained with, atoms and molecules and elementary particles and this stuff that physics knows. And so I thought that when we die, for example, that's the end of us, because consciousness must be a phenomenon that happens in the brain. And but I wanted to then, because as a scientist, I didn't want to take that as as the truth. I said, well, if that is the case, if it's true that the brain is like a computer, processes information, is a complex system, and produces consciousness, then why not? Why shouldn't a computer be conscious? And so I started thinking about it. I wanted to understand. And the more I thought, and the more I looked, and the more I couldn't, in no way I could get qualia to come out of electrical signals or signals, any kind of, chemical signals, whatever signals. There is no way that you can get qualia out of those. And it was in that state of mind, in that desire to know, to understand, that I had an extraordinary experience of consciousness that raised the ante, so to speak, because it changed the way that I understood consciousness. And this experience, I don't know if you want me to tell this experience. Is that what you want?
Please.
Yeah. So in this experience, I experienced myself as the totality, as the world that observes itself with my point of view. So I was a point of view of the world upon the world. And I tell you phenomenologically how the experience happened. So it was 1990 winter. I was with the family up at Lake Tahoe skiing. And one night I woke up around midnight. I was thirsty. I went to get a glass of water, the kitchen. And I went back to bed, just, trying to go back to sleep. So nothing special. But as I was in that state of just being quiet and trying to sleep, from my chest comes a energy that was so powerful. It was physical. It was not an imagination. It was physical, and it was white, scintillating, like a beam, a couple of feet wide. And it's love, and it is a love so powerful and so, I never had anything like that happen to me, especially love that originates from me. Maybe a source of love, and it didn't make sense. And then this love, this light exploded, and now it fills this space. It fills everything that I can perceive. And all of a sudden, my consciousness is in this light. And so I said, oh, I am this light, but also this is the same stuff out of which everything in the world is made. So this came, as a thought that came spontaneous just by living this experience. So, but this experience was extraordinary in the sense that I was both the observer and the observed. How can I be both? I mean, normally the observer is separate from what is observed. But in this experience, I was both. I was observer and observed. And my physical body was vibrating. My emotions were love, also joy and peace. In the sense of this is me, the sense of being at home. This stuff that it tastes like love and joy is me. So my physical body was vibrating. Emotions were what just described. The thought was, this is everything that, this is what creates everything. And there was such a alignment with those things. So it was like one experience that brought into resonance the physical, the emotional, the mental. And for the first time, it was spiritual, meaning that I had a sense of being everything. I was connected with the totality of what exists. So this, this experience, and then that's it. Then it stopped. And so I stay for a while, kind of just trying to understand what hit me. But that experience, which was, there is no sense of time during the experience, but it was short, probably 1 or 2 minutes. I mean, completely changed my life. So that experience, as I said earlier, up the ante, of what is consciousness. It told me that consciousness is what allows us to know who we are, but in such a way that it goes beyond what physics had ever dared to talk about. Now, I had read when I was a kid, spiritual people, things of that sort, but they were way lost, and so the only sense that I had that other people had something like this was the stuff that I read about mystical experiences in various people, spiritual people in the past. But that's that's how I was left, and that was the beginning of a journey.
Just so people understand, I mean, at this point, you are CEO of Synaptics,
Yeah.
which is a major company. It's not just you and a friend who started a business in your garage.
Yeah.
You have
Well, at that time, it was still a startup. In 1990, the company started in '86, and we were still in the research mode for neural networks. So we probably had 12, 15 people at that time. So it was still a small. Now it's a large company, but in those days it was a small company.
Mm-hmm. Yet somehow you go back to your regular life, let's say, as CEO of this startup. And what I'm getting at is you didn't just leave everything and walk into the desert to become a mystic. you somehow balanced family and work and this new interest in consciousness.
Well, this experience set me in a completely different personal journey. On the other hand, while I couldn't, I had to continue with my life, obviously, but it was clear that I had to understand that was a like a wake up call saying, hey, it isn't like you thought. My desire to understand consciousness was genuine. It had nothing to do with making a product or making money out of it or whatever. It was just a personal search. I wasn't happy and I wanted to know why am I unhappy? I did everything and I have accomplished everything and I'm unhappy. What's wrong with this picture? So that was the mindset that I was. So how can I understand this now? And but all of a sudden I had this unbelievable motivation to understand and to explore this new vista that was opened by this experience, and that's what I did. And I did that for 20 years before reaching a conclusion that let me go to the next step, which is starting a foundation and dedicating 100% of my time to the study of consciousness. While I was working as CEO of Synaptics first, and then I was chairman of Synaptics, and I took a job of CEO of another company. During that period, I dedicated probably 30 to 40% of my time to study consciousness and to go through all kinds of schools of thought and experiences of with different kind of meditations, things, all things that could help understand and explore the contours of this animal that we call consciousness. And after 20 years, I reached the conclusion that it must be foundational. Consciousness cannot be a property of the brain. If anything, it's the brain which is a property of consciousness. In other words, what was clear was that consciousness must be fundamental. The universe must have consciousness from the very beginning. Consciousness cannot emerge for something that has no consciousness. It doesn't make any sense. How can you get more from less? So to me, that was very clear, but also the importance of consciousness was so clear to me that I had to understand it more deeply, because consciousness, for example, at that time I wasn't clear: is consciousness a property of something, of a being or something, or is it ontology? In other words, or is it a property of something which is ontological? What is ontological? Consciousness or some conscious being. Okay, and then in the last 10 years, it's very clear to me that consciousness is a property together with free will. In fact, they go hand in hand, because consciousness without free will would make no sense, because it means that you are conscious of something but you cannot do anything about it, because it's simply like watching a movie that runs on its own, and you're not an actor in that movie. You simply are aware of what happens in the movie, but you cannot control anything in that movie. And vice versa, if you have free will without consciousness makes no sense whatsoever, because you don't even know what you want, you don't even know where you want to go, and so on, right? So you have no sense of, no understanding of the world that's around you, because consciousness is what allows you to know. So that's very clear. But then it means that there had to be some being that has consciousness and has free will, as opposed to those two being property of a impersonal universe. And that's the end of it. So in my experience, for example, the idea that I was a point of view of the totality, observing the totality, was so strong that that experience guided my search and my possibilities. And when I arrived at the notion of aseity as a field which is conscious and has free will, and has three properties: has an identity, which is the sense of itself, is meaning it is self-consciousness, not consciousness, self-consciousness. It has agency, in other words, it can act in the world, and then we can, see what it means. And then, it is conscious. Identity, consciousness, and agency. Those are the three properties of, and the agency is free will agency. So this defines essentially a part whole of one, where one is the totality of what exists. So one begets monads, Leibniz called monads, these entities which are essentially generated by one. And other researchers call them consciousness units, but it doesn't matter. But the point is that, when one knows itself, and by the way, one wants to know itself, so it must be a starting point of this, image of this hypothesis. One wants to know itself, and the one who knows itself brings into existence a monad, because to know itself means that if it doesn't know before, it doesn't exist. If you don't know anything, what you don't know doesn't exist. It's potential existence, but it's not existence. From the point of view of one, which is the totality of what exists. From the point of view of an individual, is less so. But for the point of view of the totality, if one doesn't know, it doesn't exist. It is potential existence, but it doesn't exist. So once he knows, it becomes it brings into existence something which is what it knows, and that's a monad. That's a consciousness unit. So that was also, was beginning to be having a sense of that. Now I can say it with a certain sense of that it makes sense, because all the possible interactions of this point of view have been checked out, and they check out, in terms of they correspond to what quantum physics is talking about. So it's not just a thought that then disconnected with what we already know and we have tested. So anyway, so that's how how I ended up changing my life based on that experience, in a way that immediately, weeks after the experience, I was already, trying to find people that knew more than myself on those issues, and trying to, get some, start discussions and, understanding. So.
Now, the idea of the part whole, which I love that phrase. If you were to ask a random person on the street, do you feel like you are a part whole? Most likely they're going to have no idea what you're talking of and no experience of this.
Yeah.
So I know that you've done a tremendous amount of work from a scientific approach. In terms of the ordinary person, do you have any thought about how could they begin to advance their understanding or come to an understanding of what they really are?
Yeah, actually, it's there is a very, very obvious, once you hear it, analogy, because every cell of my body, every cell of your body is a part whole of the body. Let me explain why. So my body started with an egg that, began to divide itself into cells, okay? Each cell contains the genome, the entire genome of the fertilized egg, out of which the entire organism was created. So each cell has the potential knowledge of the totality of the organism. So each cell is a part whole of the organism, in this case, not of the universe, but in this case of the organism. Now we are fields. We're not the body. We are fields And each field is a part whole of the totality, like every cell of my body is a part whole of the body, of the totality of the body. 50 trillion cells, they're all parts whole of who each one of us is. So the concept of part whole is basically reality at the deepest level, at the level in which there is quantumness in reality, because the body is quantum and classical, is organized holographically. In other words, each part contains the whole. That's what an hologram is. An hologram is a film that if you illuminate you illuminate a part of it, or illuminate everything, you still have the same image. You still have the same information, except if you illuminate a smaller part, you have less information, but there is still the totality. It's like there is less detail, but it's still the totality. That's a hologram. So at the deepest level, reality is organized as a hologram. And the hologram works only because you have quantum phenomena like laser light, meaning that laser light is light that has, where each photon is in the same phase of all the other photons. So, and that's a quantum phenomenon, because classically they're all, in different phases, and so they mixed up, and so you don't have the property of a laser. The property of a laser are what allow you to have and have this property even classically, even with classical information, but not with the light, which is quantum.
That is that's a beautiful analogy. And a person may hear that and say, "Oh, I like that idea. That makes sense to me. I can understand that." But I believe that you've said that there's a difference between understanding something and being it, or
Yeah.
knowledge and being. Um,
Yeah.
do you have thoughts of how does one make that leap to being?
Well, I mean, there is, we all know the difference between living an experience and, for example, reading about an experience. So we can know something by reading a book, and then we picture, in our consciousness, we transform letters of the alphabet, words, which are classical information, into an experience. But that experience is not direct, is indirect. It comes from information that others have printed or given to us, even if they tell us the story, same what is classical information, but in that case is richer because the emotions are in the prosody of the language, in the vibrations of the words, which are not the same as when you print a word. But in any event, we can reconstruct a facsimile of what we read if we have had similar experiences in the past. If we didn't, we cannot reconstruct anything. It would be like reading a book in a language that we don't know. I mean, basically, the words have meaning, the symbols, the classical symbols have meaning only to the extent that we have had similar experiences in the past. Now, when we instead have an experience and we live the experience, then we know from within. Just imagine a child that is lost in his game with the other kids, and it forgot about that it's time to go back, go home for dinner, or whatever, right? This sort of fervor and living it. That's the sense in which I would like the Buddhism to get the idea of what it means to live the experience. You become what you experience. You forget even who you are sometimes because you're so immersed into the experience. So some kids get into that state by playing, with an avatar in a video game or something. But in any event, it shows the capacity of the consciousness to become what you experience. And that's how we really know is through those processes, which are quantum in nature. They're not classical. They're not made of bits. They're made of quantum bits. And the quantum bits are, completely different animals than the bit. In fact, a quantum bit is, imagine a direction in space. So, it would be a point. Each point on the surface of a sphere would be a direction in space. From the center to that point, you have different directions in space. And so a quantum bit could have any one of those, of those states. Any one of those points could be a state of the bit, the quantum bit. So they are infinite, where in a bit is 0 or 1, up or down, right or left, and what have you. So just two possibilities. Quantum lives in a world that has this infinity of possibilities, to the point that quantum bits, when they interact, they create states which are in common from the interaction, that cannot be expressed in the regular three-dimensional space. You require more dimensions in order to express these correlations that get created by the interaction. So, the regular space is not enough, where it is enough to explain bits in the interaction of the normal, three-dimensional vectors that we use to describe classical reality. So here we are. we have a very different, we have to put ourselves in a very different frame of mind to get a better fix on what really consciousness and qualia. Qualia, what it feels, for example, to eat chocolate or to be happy, that stuff those are not numbers. Those are states which can only be expressed with quantum bits. But even if the quantum bits don't express, they only can represent some of the characteristics of the state, but they cannot know. Only a conscious being knows what is represented by quantum physics as those states. So there is more that we have that even mathematics cannot define, because in fact mathematics cannot define something with those states which are private. They cannot be reproduced. That's one theorem of quantum physics. A quantum state cannot be reproduced. You cannot make a copy. You can make a copy of a bit or the program of a computer. You can make a copy of the data on a computer. You can make as many copies as you want, but you cannot copy a quantum state made of quantum bits. So it's exactly like our conscious experience. I'm the only one that knows the state of me. And the state of me is not the body. It's not the state of the body. It's the state of this field that I am, that we are. So we are fields that control a body, and the body looks at a reality and makes an image of that reality that we, conscious beings, feel, perceive as reality. But it is, the body is an incredible filter. It filters out all kinds of stuff which is out here, because, for example, just the light, the light that we observe is a minute amount of the electromagnetic vibrations that exist where I don't see anything. I see, only the light that exists, but I don't see everything else. If my eyes were cell phones, I could actually see the thousands of phone calls that are happening right now, in front of me, where I don't see anything. But they are still here because a cell phone can figure out those phone calls, right? So, and that's another tiny band of frequencies in the microwaves, where the light that I see is in the much higher frequency waves. But anyway, so that's how the world is. The world is what we believe to be reality is only what the body has given us to look at, as conscious beings to look at, and we see only a small portion of what is out here.
After you had this experience in Tahoe, I understand how it precipitated this interest in wanting to know more, understand more. Did you have any thought like, oh, I want to have that experience again. I want to have more of that light and love. I want to be 100% of the time dwelling in that love. Did you have any desire to go back to that or recreate that experience?
Well, not to recreate, but my desire was to understand more. And I had many other extraordinary experiences of consciousness that came because of my desire to understand. I understood. For example, in some cases I tried to repeat something because I didn't get enough. For example, I had some out of body experience where my consciousness is out of the body. Okay, but I did not have a complete experience. It was out and back in. It was only, but it was sufficiently strong that I can tell the complete difference between being in the body and out of the body. And it's real. I mean, it's not an imagination. It's not a fantasy. I mean, you are out of the body, man. So in that case, I wanted to know more. So I wanted to induce, if I could, out of body. I read some books and so on. I could never do it. And so, and that was early enough that I was convinced that that happened. Because these experiences are not there for pastime for me. They are there because because of my desire to know. And so I have confidence that what I need to know, it will come. And so for me it was, most of my experiences were spontaneous. I couldn't possibly imagine that they would come at the time that they came and in the circumstances in which they came. So I sort of roll with the punches, so to speak. I just, but what is clear to me has always been, I want to understand, this is unbelievable. Like, how does it work? I mean, just like a physicist, but now not just how, like a machine, how does it work with something that goes way beyond with a machine?
Did you visit any spiritual teachers or mystics to see what their thoughts about this were?
Well, I did, I had many, I actually went through it's like a school which is called a Diamond Heart from Almas. Amid Ali is his name, the person that has created this school, and he goes by the name A.H. Almas, the pen name A.H. Almas in the books. And the reason why I went there, because I read one of his books, and and he described, it was titled Essence, and it describes exactly the experience that I had, the awakening experience. So I say, well, this guy, probably has something like I did, and so let's find out what he has to say. So I actually went, and basically, there's a school where you do 3 weeks a year, in a sort of secluded area, a place where you can have you don't have distractions, and you interact with other people in one-on-one, in triads, in groups, and so on, in different ways, and you have a teacher, and so and that was a major part of my understanding of consciousness, and through the school, for example. But I also follow other, I read a lot, follow other teachers that, but the one that was most important for me was this one. So many other things were kind of few months, to get a sense of this, and then it kind of I did not find, as much, and it was good, but there was not, I didn't, it was not in the direction in which I wanted to know more. It was enough to know what they had to teach, and that was it. But in this other one, it was closer to the level of depth that I wanted, and so I went for about 10 years. Yeah.
There's a quote here which I think is related that I would like to read. You said, if you want to find out, open yourself up to finding out, and you will be given the experience by yourself and no one else. I believe it was the vaster me who gave me the Lake Tahoe experience because I wanted to find out for no other reason than knowing, not because I wanted to make a computer out of it or make money or whatever. If you want to just know for knowing's sake, you will come to know, period.
Yeah, I agree, but I wrote it, so I still agree with what I wrote. At the same time, I might add that the time when you get the answer, you cannot choose that one. So you have to open. That's what opening yourself to receive it means. You basically you send the message out, and then it will come in its own time, and sometimes sooner, sometimes later, sometimes it doesn't come, and so you take what you get. But for me, the sense that the sense is that I am a much vaster being that the ego, the portion of me that believes to be the body. Okay, and now I have a sort of a communication with that vaster self that is me. And so in the early stages of my development, that understanding was not so clear. Now it is much more clear. And so I know when I know that I ask myself, the vaster me, to, hey, I want to know this, give me a hand here. I'm serious about understanding, and so sometimes it comes in a dream, sometimes it comes when I wake up, following a dream that I don't remember. Sometimes it comes when I'm writing and I'm in that state of openness, and some nice idea come that I had not thought before, never read anywhere. And so, that this creativity comes in its own ways, and it's a joy, clearly, obviously. But again, you cannot count on it. You have to be just allow things to happen, to work their way, because this is not determinism. This is not.
To me, this is very powerful. This idea or the feeling that you're expressing here. If you want to just know for knowing's sake, you will come to know. Because a lot of times, I think there's many reasons why people get involved in a spiritual search. I mean, you mentioned the unhappiness, in your own experience, and just wanting to not wanting to not be miserable, wanting to. There are many wants, many psychological wants, let's say, that people hope a spiritual search might solve for them. Do you feel like there's psychological work that a person might need to do in order to bring themselves to the place of wanting to just know for knowing's sake?
I think so. And that's one of the values, for example, of the diamond heart that I mentioned earlier, because the diamond heart is a spiritual and psychological method. And of course, psychology and spirituality are, there are no clear boundaries between, right? So that was very clear to me even before going to this school, but the point is that there are, we have many traumas typically that we are not aware of having. And those traumas can come out exactly in this type of psychological, spiritual environment that allows you to know why you fear certain things or you want certain things, and or you don't understand why you're angry, for example, at one point, or why you want to do something that is so appears irrational, and this is psychological work that allows to overcome many of the traumas that conditions us without us knowing, and so one releases a lot of the of this jerky motion that one feels sometimes, wanting to do something, but it doesn't make any sense. You shouldn't do it, but you want it, all this kind of stuff. So there is a lot of work to be done in order to free oneself of a lot of that stuff. So that's part of the journey that one has to go through.
Your foundation and the work that you've been doing since I believe you said in an interview about 2009 you went full time into the study of consciousness.
Yeah.
Can you tell me today, 2024, like what is the tip of the spear in terms of what you're researching?
Well, the tip of the spear has been finding a way to reconcile, in some ways even more, unite science and spirituality, which are two silos, because they don't talk to each other. The spiritual person thinks the matter is secondary, and who cares on the spirit. And of course, the opposite happens on the field of science, especially physics, which is the sort of the foundation of all scientific discipline. Provides the essence of the physical reality in which we live, the understanding of that. And so for me, that was the heart of what I wanted to do, to understand consciousness clearly, but in the context in which physics and spirituality come together. And spirituality I came to define essentially as the interiority of nature, the interiority of what we feel. The fact that we experience is spiritual. Whether we experience, a view of the hills in front of me, or the taste of something, it still comes from that, quantumness, quantum world that I perceive, but I couldn't really find the connections completely. And in the last 5 years, this connection has been found together with a professor of physics of quantum information, which is a world authority in quantum information. He's an Italian, University of Pavia, and his name is Giacomo Mauro Dariano. And we wrote the first theory of consciousness the last 2 years ago. And this theory basically explains consciousness in a way that is very interesting. In fact, it explains quantum physics as derivative of a deeper reality, which is conscious and has free will. In other words, it is clear that consciousness and free will are so fundamental they cannot be explained with anything simpler than themselves. How can you explain? You cannot explain free will with something that doesn't have free will. You cannot explain consciousness with something that doesn't know. And that's what people are trying to do. Scientists are trying to explain consciousness with something that doesn't have consciousness. Oh, it comes out of the complexity of the brain. It's an emergent property of the brain. Come on. I mean, these are all words. What is it? Oh, well, oh, wow. Instead, if you say, no, consciousness and free will must be the starting point. And if you start there, then you can explain why quantum physics is so weird, because it has to have properties that we don't expect from physical reality, like free will and consciousness. For example, okay, the way we explain the consequences of consciousness and free will is that quantum information cannot be reproduced. That's a theorem of quantum physics, but the quantum physicists cannot explain why quantum information cannot be reproduced, cannot be copied. It's a fact, you take it for good, and you say, well, I don't understand, because classical information can be copied, the bits of the computer can be copied, so how come the quantum information cannot be copied? It cannot be copied because it can only be known from the inside, from a conscious being that is in that quantum state. You see, so we now can explain quantum physics, and nobody could explain quantum physics by starting with consciousness and free will as foundational reality. But when you do that, then the entire narrative about how the world happened and the evolution of the world and so on changes completely. You can no longer, believe that life emerged out of non-life, or out of randomness, variations and selection or randomness, which is the way science is trying to explain how life emerged. How did we get the first cell? It came out of something that didn't have even the concept of life. Come on, come on. Of course, nobody has been able to explain it, but they still, continue to insist that it has to be that way. It cannot be that way. In fact, life is, in this larger view, when one knows itself, because if consciousness and free will, are there from the beginning, what purpose do they serve? Well, one is the capacity of one to know, that's consciousness. The other one is the will of one to know, and that's free will. So one wants to know itself, statement comes, one must be conscious and one must have free will. And then what he knows anew from not knowing, he knows, then that brings into existence what he knows. Now what he has done, he has created life out of itself by generating monads, just like a cell makes a copy of itself at a much coarser level. But at the total level, one creates entities that has, like himself, parts all, have consciousness, free will, and want to know themselves, which is us. We are those entities, not the body, the entities that control the body.
The idea that one wants to know itself, is that something that experientially or is that a hypothesis about why are there particles? Why do particles exist?
Well, it is a postulate, it's the most sensible postulate. In fact, the postulate that I start with in this new union of science and spirituality is that one, the totality of what exists is dynamic, holistic, and wants to know itself. This is a postulate. Okay, and you start from there. Why does it make sense? Because deep down, we also want to know ourselves. So, it's self-evident because the self-evidence is within ourselves. But the self-evidence cannot be outside, because outside there is only classical information. And that classical information is already an unbelievable reduction from quantumness to classical, from qubits that are entangled to bits which are separate. So we have to start with it with this is a postulate. If we start with postulate, but this postulate explains things that without that postulate cannot explain. So what is the purpose of this postulate? To explain. Well, look at that. This postulate explains why quantum physics has to have two things. One, consciousness, which is quantum information. The other one is free will. And free will is the indeterminacy of quantum physics. The fact that quantum physics, the probability of quantum physics, refers to something which is not yet created. It is not about lack of knowledge of something that exists, but we don't know. It is lack of knowledge of something that isn't yet created, because what creates is free will. Consciousness and free will creates. You see, all of a sudden we can explain things that nobody, before is weird. Now it makes sense. It is weird that quantum physics is, indeterminate. Why does it have to be indeterminate? In a world which the classical world is deterministic. Why is quantum physics indeterminate? Because the more creates the less. Indetermination, you cannot create indetermination from determinism. Determinism can only get another, a determinism, but you can create from the indeterminism, you can create determinism as a special case of something which is vaster. From consciousness, you can create unconsciousness. Not vice versa. From unconsciousness, how can you create consciousness? BS, right? I mean, it's impossible. So, this idea but this idea starts with, with the idea that cannot be God. God cannot be part of physics. God cannot be, and that idea, pushed to the limit is crazy, because then it eliminates what makes us human. Because then everything is better. Then it becomes physicalism, reductionism, and AI will be better than us. I mean, this is what the consequences of this way of thinking that is dominating, which is actually scientism, is not science, is scientism, that is dominating our worldview today.
We're in this scientism paradigm, let's say.
Yeah.
And you're talking about changing that, a scientific revolution. Are you getting traction with your new idea, or are people just resistant and don't want to hear what you have to say?
Well, the sort of hardcore physicists don't want to hear about this, and they will be most likely the last one to sort of accept this view, because they believe that they know everything, and when in fact it's not so. The people that, on the other hand, have been trying to understand this. Most physicists had never thought about consciousness because it's being eliminated. It's an epiphenomenon of the brain. It's not a problem. It's the problem of the neuroscientists. It's the problem of, so it's not a problem, because we want to see how this dark matter works, and that's the only important things here in the world. And, consciousness, who cares? That's somebody else's problem. I mean, that's the kind of mindset. And so the people that have this mindset don't want to hear anything that distract them from their mindset. And so, but at the same time, if you say something that hits the spot, and many of the things that I'm saying hit the spot from people that have been asking questions, people that believe that they know all the answers, forget it. They will be the last to figure out something new because they know it already, right? Or they have, they're focalized, on one thing that they want to know. What is dark energy or whatever, and how come that now, galaxies are, formed much earlier than we thought. Oh, wow, that's the problem. That's the major problem that we need to solve, So the mindset is not open to include things that are, for the moment, soft, but in fact are the problems that today mankind has, because we do not know who we are. And if we listen to those people, we are machines. And if we are machines, then AI will be better than us. And all this BS that we read then makes sense. Instead, it does not make sense, because we are not machines. The body is a machine, but it's also a machine which is quantum and classical, of a kind that science yet doesn't understand. They describe life as if we were a computer. We are not a computer. We are quantum and classical. We are connected with the fields. The body is connected with the fields. The particles are not objects. The particles are states of a quantum field. The quantum fields, we are saying, are conscious and have free will. That's the novelty. But the novelty explains exactly what people don't, scientists cannot explain. Why do we have indeterminacy? Why do we have, probabilities that are contrary to what the classical probability are, which we need that kind of probability to explain the entanglement, which is a property of quantum systems that does not exist in classical systems. So people that are really honest with themselves and they want to understand, they will find a path from what we're saying. It will take time. I mean, entanglement was discovered by Schrödinger in 1934, 1935. Okay, and then Einstein, who wanted, his idea of the reality was that reality is deterministic. It was a realist. There is, something here, and what is here is well determined, and blah, blah, blah. So he could not stand quantum physics. Wrote a paper in 1935, which is being known as the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen EPR paradox, in which he was saying the existence of entanglement is an indication that quantum physics cannot be right, cannot be complete. There is something missing. And so it's not a full theory yet. And his standing was so large, and that he echoed the thinking of most physicists. And so this thing, nothing happened for 50 years, partly because we couldn't, nobody could do experiments with, with atoms or particles even. In fact, particles, individual particles that were necessary to prove or disprove, his theory. And so people did not believe that entanglement was a real problem. It was a real property of quantumness. The first experiment was done in 1982 by a French physicist that received a Nobel Prize a few years ago. It was it was a few years ago, physicists agreed that entanglement was real because all the sort of the objections that were thrown, at its existence had been answered by experiments that proved that entanglement exists. And so in 2014, there was no longer an objection that stood, in the way of accepting entanglement as a real phenomenon. So it took 80 years before entanglement was accepted by the physics community. It's still, we don't want it, but it's there. It's proven that it's there. We don't want it, but it's there. Okay. And now more and more physicists begin to understand that entanglement is such a fundamental thing that is happening in the quantum world, because it connects things in ways that were not even expected early on. And in my way of thinking, entanglement is what allows the comprehension. The comprehension connects things that are quantum states are connected by entanglement. And so entanglement is what allows to know more and more and more, where the comprehension has to be a holistic phenomenon of the totality, because everything is interconnected. They're not separable parts. The reality is not made of separable parts, which is what classical reality would be. Quantum reality is holistic, and it is dynamic. It's not the same, instant after instant. So the two postulate, the two properties of one, that dynamic, holistic, then there is, it wants to know itself. The first two are exactly what quantum physics has revealed. So quantum physics is not changed at all by what I'm saying. So, but what Dariano and I are saying, doesn't change anything of what we know, all the experimental stuff that has been done, but it points the way to a new physics that is in between what we know, quantum physics, and the fact that we understand. Quantum physics can only explain the reality of qualia, but it stops there. It cannot explain why from qualia, we actually have understanding. We get meaning. The meaning of qualia is something which is within the conscious being. It doesn't come from the outside. And so there must be, therefore, some physics that goes beyond the physics that we know. But on the other hand, we already know that there has to be some other physics because quantum physics and general relativity have not been unified. And everybody's been trying for 80 years to unify those two pillars of physics and have been unable to succeed because we don't understand what is time, what is space, what is matter, and what is energy. If you ask, what is it? Why? People cannot tell you. So, but we pretend to know sometimes, and if we do that, then we'll never find out. So it will take a while, it will take a while before the hardcore scientific community will accept what Dariano and I are saying. But and that's why I don't fret about being being considered a fool or don't understand or whatever, because who cares? The people that are open, those are the ones that will then, if they will find value in what I'm saying, great. And if they don't find value, that's too bad. But maybe there is no value, which is fine with me. But that's the best I can do. But I think this problem of understanding consciousness is foundational today. We cannot solve the problems that we, as humanity, that we have in front of us, if we don't understand who we are. If we think that we are machines, we will be controlled by the machines that the powerful people are building. Okay? Because we are going to simply allow the machines to give us the answer, and we shrink. Instead of growing, we will shrink, because we trust what ChatGPT is saying more than what a human being can say, because we believe that that's objective information. And so we have to be very careful with the use of the new tools that are coming out of Silicon Valley, because those can be, if they're not used well, they can be extraordinary in allowing us to move forward. But if they're used badly, we take a step back instead of taking a step forward as mankind.
Couple questions. I know we're starting to come up on an hour and a half. I don't want to keep you too long. Death and identity. The body, clearly the body dies and disappears. What about Federico and the personality and your memory, your experiences? Do you have a sense of when you die, what becomes of all of that?
Well, I don't, because I never, I have not died yet. But on the other hand, there are hundreds of thousands of cases of near-death experience, which have been reported. Many thousands of books have been, well, hundreds of books for certain have been written about near-death experiences, and the narrative is pretty much the same on the foundational level, pretty much the same, in all of the cases in which they are described. So I describe this sort of the typical narration. So a person, goes into the hospital with the heart that doesn't beat anymore, and the brain has no electrical signals, so is clinically dead. But they try to revive the person, and so they lower the body temperature, whatever they do, and they eventually allow this person to live. And this person then when he wakes up in the recovery room after the operation, remembers an experience that he had while he was in the hospital, where he found itself or herself above his body that was in the operating table, and he sees the doctors working over the body, the nurses, and he reports. What he reports is pretty much the way it happened. So and so that but then he feels drawn to move into a different area in other parts of space, and it moves through what appears to be a tunnel, and there is some light at the end of the tunnel, and he moves toward he's drawn to that light, and then when he exits, he finds himself in a environment full of light, but it's not physical light. It's a different kind of light. It's kind of physical, spiritual light, and it meets parents that were dead, friends that were dead, and they feel love and joy, sense of peace of being at home, and they don't want to come back. They're so happy that, but then a being of light tells them, hey, you're not done yet, so go back. And then they wake up, and they remember this thing. So how can that be, right? What does it mean? This is BS, this is just that somebody of course the brain doesn't work. Yeah, but if the brain doesn't work, why does it have an experience of this profundity, and that they all have similar experiences? And why are those people then typically changed by that experience, like I've been changed by mine? In the sense that there is a revelation, there is something much deeper and more to life than what they thought before. And this happened when the brain doesn't work, for Christ's sake. How is that possible? Okay, so first of all, after my awakening experience, my sense of, I lost completely the fear of death, because that is inherent in that experience is that you are a vaster being. You're not tied to the body. My consciousness was out of the body. It was in everywhere. It was in the body, but also out of the body. So how is that possible, right? So that reality cannot be the way that you had imagined or you were told. And so, so clearly the sense of that I have now of life and death, to me, death is a passage to, to who you really are, who I am. I am a vaster being, and I will remember who I am when my body dies. Right now, I'm here to do my job and whatever I came here to do. I will find out better when I'm on the other side. But for me, and also, it is possible, and that people have reported, and I have experiences that I could, explain similarly, in which which I've had other lives. So we, and that makes a lot of sense, because if we are eternal beings, and life is only a small portion of of the eternity, we clearly must have had other lives, in this reality, and perhaps in many other realities. Who knows? That's all to find out. And so my point is that I am open. I don't have the answer, but I'm open. And I think if I were to bet, I would bet that, when I die, I will wake. Instead of dying, I will awake to a vaster reality. So that's my sense of it. And then I will remember what happened, what also will reframe what happened in my life. It will be reframed in a vaster knowledge of who I am, of what I wanted to achieve when I came in this world, and so on and so forth. So for me, the death as it is, as I understood it, 40 years ago, before the awakening experience, it cannot be. Clearly the body dies. There's no question about that. But who I am does not.
On the question of conscious entities or part wholes, I believe you call them.
Seities, yeah.
I believe I've heard you say something along the lines of consciousness is not in computers, and consciousness is not in rocks and automobiles and so forth and so on. What about other mammals? Cats and dogs and.
So consciousness is in fields, okay? So for example, the field of electrons is conscious. The field of electrons is conscious in this theory. So we are fields. So we are not physical entities in space and time. The field of electrons, to describe a quantum state of the field of electrons, we need to express that quantum state in Hilbert space, which is a n-dimensional, even infinite dimensional space where you can express the state of that field. So that is the part that, and also quantum physics is saying that an electron is not an object, is a state of a field that is inseparable from the field. So when we think of an electron, typically we think of a little ball, a little particle that can run independent of the other particles and independent of the field. But this is not true. I mean, physicists are saying this, they've been saying this for the last 40 years or so, 50 years. An electron is a state of a field. It's like a little wave on the surface of a sea. The wave cannot be separated from the sea. It is a feature, it is a form within the sea. So an electron is a form within the field of electrons. And it cannot be separate, it cannot be taken apart from the field. So if the consciousness, the real consciousness, the self-consciousness is in the electron field, you can say that when a state is excited, meaning then it exists in space and time. An excited state is a state that can exist in space and time. That electron, you can say, well, it shares the consciousness of the field, but it's not self-conscious. It doesn't know that it is conscious. You see, so the self-consciousness, which is like what we have, is in the field. An electron can be said that it is conscious or not conscious, depending on how you kind of look at it. Because an electron can appear and disappear. When it's excited, it's in space and time, and when it's not excited, it disappears. Electrons can transform themselves into other particles. So that there is all kinds of properties in quantum physics that are telling you that that an electron cannot be an object. But most physicists, even today, even people that study quantum physics, they think of an electron as a little ball. Yeah, sometimes it behaves like a wave, sometimes it behaves like a particle, but it is, they think of it as separate. No, it's not separate from the field. And many people have not studied, quantum field theory. Even if you study quantum physics, they say there is also quantum field theory, which is much more complicated. And it was, if you do physics, you study. If not, we stop here. And so you never know. But you think you know. So to me, that's already physics is saying things that most physicists don't have not paid enough attention, and certainly they never paid attention in the context of what I'm talking about, which is consciousness, which is a quantum phenomenon. And if it is a quantum phenomenon, a computer, which is classical, cannot be conscious. That's it. There is no two ways about it. It's not, maybe later in 50 years or in 5,000 years. No, a classical computer cannot be conscious because consciousness is a property of a field, not a property of a physical system. So the matter of the computer, shares the consciousness of the fields of which it is states. But the bit is our definition. We have defined what is a bit and what is not. The 0 and the 1 of the computer is a theory, but a theory that is supported by the matter of the computer, as long as the matter of the computer is within a certain temperature, a certain pressure, and then we can reliably recognize 0 and 1. And if we can do that, then we have a computer. But we, conscious beings, have created the computer, not vice versa.
Let's see if I understand my body, my physical body, then it's not conscious because it is a manifestation.
Yes.
In this classical reality.
The physical body is not conscious. There is no consciousness in the brain or in any other part of the body. The consciousness is this field that communicates with the physical body using particles, atoms, quantum matter, which is, I call it live matter, not classical information, but quantum, a sort of quantum information in space and time, which has not even been considered as a distinguished from quantum states and classical states. There is something in between which is both. And that's the kind of matter that life uses to work, life which is quantum and classical, and that's what quantum fields use to communicate with bodies, quantum and classical. A quantum field cannot communicate with a computer directly, because a computer, the bit of the computer is a property of matter that we have defined. It's nothing to do with the fundamental properties of matter. It's an abstraction, it's a theory. A bit is a theory, but a theory that finds its embodiment is supported by the way we construct the computers, and so we can rely on that as long as the computer works in a certain environmental conditions in which it can work. But if not, it doesn't work anymore. You raise the temperature, the computer cannot work. Also, our body raise the temperature to 50 degrees, and we cannot even, cannot think, right? I mean, we just, the body doesn't work anymore. But the consciousness goes beyond, consciousness is not based on the operation of the body. The ego, that is the portion that is identified with the body, but is still part of the field. The ego, that believes to be the body, when the body doesn't work, it doesn't experience anything, because it only looks at what the body produces, and the body produces chaos, just information which is unintelligible. The ego doesn't have any consciousness. And so we think the consciousness is of the body, because there is no consciousness, like in deep sleep, or when you're, really sick, or when you're anesthetized, or what have you. But that's only because, the ego pays attention exclusively to the information produced by the body. And when the information is not what he expects, there is no consciousness. But the fact that we have out-of-body experiences, or the fact that we have near-death experiences, tells you that there is more than what we are told. Because if the body doesn't work, we should not have any experience. And generally, we don't. But when you have a near-death experience, and when the brain is not functional, how can consciousness be a property of the functioning of the brain? If the brain doesn't function, it doesn't stand to reason. And it isn't one guy that had it. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people have had those experiences, not few.
Is it impossible for me to know whether or not you, for example, have consciousness? I can only know that I am conscious. Correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. I am the only one that knows about being conscious. I cannot, and you are the only one to know, because I'm the only one to know what I know. I mean, my knowledge, my experience is private, cannot be reproduced. That's what quantum physics is already saying. Cannot be reproduced, cannot be copied. There cannot be two of me. There cannot be two of you.
So then I guess my question of, well, is my pet cat that I'm looking at right now, is it a conscious being? Well, it's impossible for me.
Just like us, there is a conscious field, and the cat is one manifestation of that conscious field. So its consciousness is not in the cat's body, it is in that field, and it is conscious. For sure it's conscious. A cat is conscious. It's just a question of, what is the nature of its consciousness? Only the cat knows. I mean, it will be impossible for us, while in our body, thinking that we are the body, to imagine what the consciousness of the cat is. It may be when we are dead, we might be able to have a better, understanding of that. But even when we are dead, this privacy of the quantum information, of the quantum state, remains. It cannot go away when you are, because the deeper reality is quantum. And so we stay within that deeper reality. So it isn't like that there may be other possibilities, other physics there that we might find, but certainly we cannot find them while we are incarnated, when we are believed to be the body. We are, when we are in our state, we cannot possibly imagine how a cat, experiences the world. I cannot even imagine how you experience the color red or the taste of chocolate, and vice versa for you. I have to rely on what you tell me. But even what you tell me cannot express the redness that you feel for what you call red, and the redness that I feel when I say red. We call with the same name red, but for you the quale associated with red could be the quale associated with green, for what I know. For what is for me green, you see. There is no, the two things are fairly independent. They're not, it's not like if what you call red is an objective feature of the world. And in fact, many experiments, in psychophysics, at the borderline of definitions, they find that you think one thing and you think another person thinks another thing, or have different experiences. Also, the colors. Look at a rainbow. Is there a sharp distinction between orange and red, or between green and blue? I mean, no. I mean, there is a transition. So if you are not in that transition region, then you can definitely say it's red or it's blue, but or green, but not, but when you are in that transition region, you may say, no, it's orange for me, and I say, no, it's red for me, and we are both right, that is because color is not an objective feature of the world. In fact, physics doesn't cannot determine what, I mean, physics says, is a correlate of the frequency of the electromagnetic radiation. The color is a correlate of the of a frequency of light, but it's not something that you can rely on it, in the sense that because the cones that we have in our eye, they have a very broad response. So there is is like RGB, red, green, and blue, and but they have a lot of overlap between them. So it is the brain that kind of creates separations and allows to distinguish millions of colors by taking 3 signals, but those signals are highly overlapped. So it is consciousness that provides the qualia. The qualia is a property of consciousness. It's not a property of the brain.
So this is the last question along this line. I talked to a pet psychic who claimed that they could tell me what my pet was thinking. Do you think I just wasted my money, or does that fit within your model as a possibility?
Well, if it is possible for me to know what you are thinking, once you have translated into classical signals, which is mental words, what you perceive. What a psychic cannot get is the image, the qualia, before it is translated into a thought. So the same is true for a cat. Whatever the cat, when the cat, the conscious, the qualia of the thought, which is this thing before it gets reified into electrical signals in the brain. So you can, like we can, already with a pet, you can, MRI, you can functional MRI, you can tell that a person is angry, for example. Well, the angry is patches of excitation in the brain, and you can, they are is a correlate of anger, but they cannot tell you what you feel. What is the feeling of anger that they are experiencing? So saying that you're angry is a classical phenomenon. Having, being able to actually copy that the qualia of the anger, which is the actual feeling that the anger has for you in that particular instance, that is not something that can be done, according to our theory, cannot be done by anybody but you. In other words, the qualia are completely private, and that's the quantum information correspond to qualia. The classical information correspond to the symbols, like electrical signals or bits of the computer, whatever. Those are all classical signals. They are signals that can be shared, can be copied, can be perceived by others. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Well, I would like to wrap up and but let the listeners know you have, I believe you have one book published and another one that's coming out soon. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, the Silicon is an autobiography, and that was published in 2022, if I remember correctly. And Irreducible is the new one, which has been published in Italian a year and a half ago. It's been doing very well in Italy, and it will be available in about a month, early 1st of June, I believe. It can already be ordered in Amazon. It's called Irreducible. The subtitle is Consciousness, Life, Computers, and Human Nature.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Excellent. And if people want to follow what you're doing, do you have a website or are you on social media?
I have a foundational website, but unfortunately I don't have the time to keep it up. And so it's being kind of, it's there. I mean, it has a bunch of things, but it's not, it's not as current as I would like to have it because I cannot keep up with it. But it's fagginfoundation.org. That's the site of the foundation, and there are many videos in Italian and in English, which are my two languages that I know very well, and so for people that want to find out more, they can find many videos or YouTube's or in some cases just voice.
Excellent. And I will put links to the books and your website. I'll put those in the show notes for this episode so people can find it easily.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you, Sean. It was a pleasure. It's such a vast subject that we could talk for hours and still scratch the surface. So
I know.
We touched about a lot of points, and until next time.
Thank you for listening to this edition of Journals of Spiritual Discovery. I'm your host, Sean Nevins. For more information about today's guest, as well as more interviews, books, and other resources, go to spiritualteachers.org. That's spiritualteachers.org.